A new Congress with Republican majorities in both the House and Senate, sworn in with Russia presenting a big foreign policy challenge for lawmakers. California Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speier joins me now. Congresswoman, good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
So let me ask you about all of this, what seems to be a disconnect between the White House and Donald Trump, even a disconnect between Donald Trump and some prominent Republicans, John McCain, Lindsey Graham. Do you think there maybe is something that Donald Trump knows that we don't, that's going to suggest to us that maybe all of this concern about the Russian hacking and deliberately trying to get involved in our election was overstated?
I don't think there's any question that the hacking took place. You've got 17 intelligence agencies making that statement unanimously now. If he knows something, he's heard it directly from Putin himself or one of his underlings, and that would suggest greater emphasis on the fact that the Russians did interact with the electoral process in the United States. My big fear right now is that he doesn't appreciate that Russia is a threat to this country. That it is not just this fuzzy, warm relationship between he and Putin, that Putin is a polar bear. He will eat him up because he's a KGB operative. He has been tutelage in this issue of espionage his entire life.
Well, do you think there's a chance that the president-elect, Congresswoman, do you think
try and address and create havoc in the United States?
But do you think there's a chance that the president-elect, given that every president who goes in realizes the enormity of the job, but also starts to get a lot more information than they ever had before, do you think there's a chance he'll change his tune, and that some senators who feel, as Lindsey Graham and John McCain do, could be influential in that regard?
I certainly hope so. His job now is not to, be focused on himself, but on the 325 million people in this country and to keep us safe. I think his reluctance to agree to the hacking has more to do with his feeling that somehow it would reduce the success of his election. And I think he's got to get beyond that and realize that the Russians have been hacking into the United States for over 20 years, and that we have got to redouble our efforts internally to make sure that we have the kind of cybersecurity that's in place so that we don't have our electric grid going down, that we don't have our financial services industry brought to its knees. It's a very serious problem.
What do you make of the fact that he says, well, I think that one of the answers here is just to use couriers and not use email?
Well, he is no longer going to be in Trump Tower where he can hire a courier to run across town. I mean, this is a large country with, diplomatic embassies all over the world. I mean, you can't courier information by doves to Europe or Asia.
I think you just gave people here in the studio a vision of carrier pigeons, but we'll leave it at that. I do want to ask you about domestic policy, because you heard that little clip from Donald Trump, and I think that he hasn't been circumspect about this. There's a lot of executive orders that he plans to rescind. Obamacare is at the top of the Republican list. Now, the president's going to be coming to Washington. He's going to be talking to all of you. But given the numbers, given the reality of a Republican president, a Republican House, a Republican Senate, what kind of strategy could you possibly come up with to stop him from doing what he's promised to do?
I think the best thing we can do is educate the president through the public how devastating the repeal of the Affordable Care Act would be. Now, you can't keep the great things you love about the Affordable Care Act, the ability to protect those with pre-existing conditions and keep your kids on the policy. You can't do that without having an individual mandate. You have to have a large enough pool of insureds to be able to provide those kinds of benefits. So you can't cherry pick what you like and get rid of what you don't like under that kind of a setting. So I think he's going to have a couple of rude awakenings, and I think the Democrats are going to do our level best to make sure that the communities of interest, and there are millions, 20 million people who have insurance today that didn't have insurance before the Affordable Care Act.
Congresswoman Jackie Speier, always good to see you. Thanks so much.
Happy New Year.